Have you ever thought about how uh, major shifts in society, like, say, new ideas about democracy topping up, or maybe a really fast-changing economy, how that can actually reshape people's core spiritual beliefs?
Hmm.
Or, how those moments of big change can spark these huge movements that just redraw the whole map, culturally and religiously?
Yeah,
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of moment in American history,
right,
the Second Great Awakening.
right.
And our mission, basically, is to explore not just what it was, but the really interesting reasons it happened, its core ideas, what made it unique, and, yeah, the fascinating people, and even totally new religions that came out of it.
And I think understanding this period, it really gives you these aha moments about American culture, things that still resonate now.
Hmm.
It's an era where you see all these forces, social, economic, philosophical, democrat, they're not just, happening separately. They're actively weaving together, kind of amplifying each
Mm.
other.
Yep.
They converged in a way that fundamentally changed how faith, democracy, and individual agency played together in America.
Hmm.
It laid groundwork we're still standing on, really.
So let's jump right in then, if we had to pin it down. What was the Second Great Awakening? What was his main message?
Well, fundamentally, the Second Great Awakening was this huge wave of Protestant Christian revivals. It swept across the U.S. roughly from the late 1790s, maybe into the 1840s.
Okay.
And unlike some earlier religious movements that were maybe more intellectual, its core message really stressed righteous living, personal restraint, a strong sense of morality.
Right.
The idea was that these personal choices, these individual acts of reform, wouldn't just lead you to salvation, but would actually help lead society towards being more just and godly. It was a pretty optimistic view of what people could achieve.
So it had that social angle too, not just personal faith. And I hear it spread incredibly fast like the First Great Awakening did. How did it catch on so quickly across the country?
Yeah, its spread was really remarkable. And a big part of that was down to well, innovative methods used by groups like the Methodists and Baptists.
Okay.
They were really good at organizing these things called camp meetings.
Camp meetings.
Yeah, imagine thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, gathering out in fields, often for days, away from any church building. Multiple preachers speaking with just incredible emotion, sometimes round the clock.
Wow.
Huge crowds, all sorts of people. These weren't, quiet, scholarly sermons. They were immersive, really dynamic spiritual events, often with very strong emotional reactions. They kind of bypassed the old structures and went straight to the people. It was super effective for growth, especially on the frontier.
That sounds incredibly intense. But something like this huge spiritual shift, it doesn't just happen out of nowhere, right?
Mhm.
I'm really curious, what were the underlying forces, social, economic, philosophical, that made the time right for this kind of awakening? This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating mix of things. One huge factor was this democratic and individualistic surge.
Okay.
America was really wrestling with its democratic ideals back then. There was this growing hunger for more people to participate, especially, lower and middle class folks who often felt left out by the older, more elite systems.
Right, they wanted a voice.
Exactly. People wanted agency, a say in their government, but also just in their own lives.
And it sounds like that desire for agency, that political feeling, kind of spilled over into religion.
Precisely. That democratic impulse wasn't just political. It mapped directly onto spiritual desires. The Second Great Awakening really caught fire among the lower and middle classes. It offered them this powerful sense of empowerment, spiritual equality.
Mhm.
Camp meetings, especially, were often described as surprisingly egalitarian spaces. You'd have whites, blacks enslaved, and free men, women, all seemingly participating as equals, sharing these profound spiritual moments.
That's amazing for the time.
It really was. It wasn't just about faith. It was almost like a temporary social experiment, offering this radical glimpse of a more inclusive America, way ahead of its time, really challenging the rigid social structure.
That's a really powerful point, how the spiritual gathering itself kind of leveled the field,
Yeah.
even if just for a bit. And tied into that, there was another big shift happening, right? This move away from pure reason towards something more emotional, romanticism.
Exactly. The Enlightenment focus on pure logic started feeling, well, a bit cold or insufficient for a lot of people. They began looking for spiritual experiences that engaged their feelings, their intuition, their personal experience, not just their, thinky part.
Right. More heart, less head.
Yeah, pretty much. And That dramatically changed preaching. Gone were the really dense academic sermons of the First Great Awakening. Instead, preachers adopted this new, direct, passionate style. It was designed to stir emotions, connect with ordinary people on their level. It really shows a deep cultural shift in how people were looking for meaning.
And we can't forget, the economy was also changing drastically with the market revolution starting up. That fostered this idea that individuals could control their own economic success, right? Like through hard work and making good choices.
And that secular idea, that self-made ideal, found a perfect, powerful echo in the Second Great Awakening's message.
Also,
Well, preachers were telling sinners that salvation was basically in their hands. The message was super clear and empowering. Change your life, act justly, control your impulses, and you will get everlasting bliss.
oh,
This was a radical break, a really sharp contrast to the old Calvinist idea of predestination from the First Great Awakening, where God decided everything beforehand.
like that's a huge theological shift.
Huge. It was a spiritual embrace of self-determination, fitting perfectly with the era's capitalism. It embedded that idea of individual agency, you make your own destiny, right into the American soul, both religious and secular. It's a core concept we still grapple with today.
Okay, so you have these powerful forces coming together, democracy, emotion, individual agency in the economy and in faith. What did the movement actually look like day to day? How did these ideas show up in people's lives and practices?
Well, it definitely stressed individual choice. Salvation came through righteous living, moral improvement. It wasn't just about which church you were born into. It was a conscious personal decision. And you saw that reflected in how inclusive the revival meetings often were. They really stand out for welcoming people from, well, all social strata, races, and genders, as historians put it.
Which must have been radical.
Absolutely. Imagine for a few days the usual social hierarchies just kind of suspended, people sharing this intense communal spiritual experience across those deep societal divides. That gave a lot of people who felt unheard elsewhere a real sense of belonging and agency.
That's a powerful image. And you mentioned the change in preaching earlier. This emotional style seems key. Can you say more about how it worked and what it aimed for?
Yeah, it was central. Preachers really moved away from dense theology. They used passionate, plain language sermons full of vivid stories, direct address, powerful metaphors people could relate to.
To connect better.
Exactly. The goal wasn't just getting intellectual agreement, but sparking this deep emotional conversion, a feeling of being born again. But crucially, it wasn't just about saving individual souls.
Oh,
There was also a strong emphasis on reforming society itself, making it more moral. Charles Grandison Finney, who we should talk more about, was huge on this. He preached that real faith demanded action to make society better.
linking personal faith to social action.
Precisely. This focus on collective moral improvement really laid the groundwork for so many reform movements that came out of this period. Temperance, abolitionism, you name it. It was a call to action, seeing personal salvation and social justice as linked, leaving a huge mark on American reform.
That connection to reform is fascinating, shows the long reach. And for a movement this big, especially back then with travel being tough, were there particular hotspots or regions where it really took off?
Oh, definitely. It spread like wildfire, especially in the South and across the Western frontier. Those camp meetings were vital, as were these energetic traveling preachers called circuit riders. They went everywhere.
American Riders.
Yeah, they brought the message to really isolated places. But if you're looking for a real geographic heart, the Burned Over District in upstate New York became this incredibly significant hub.
The Burned Over District. Why that name?
It got that name because it had been swept by so many waves of revivalist passion that some joked there was no fuel, no unconverted people left to burn.
Huh.
This intense spiritual environment, this kind of religious hothouse, it created the perfect conditions for new interpretations and even entirely new religions to sprout up. It was a real crucible of American religious creativity.
Wow. So let's talk about the people then. What did all this mean for the leaders, the followers, and just the overall religious scene in America? It sounds like this era really produced some major figures and, like you said, even new faiths. Who are some of the key players driving things?
Yeah, this period gave us some real giants. Charles Grandison Finney is probably one of the most famous. He was a leading revivalist who really perfected that new, less cerebral, more emotional preaching style we talked about.
Okay.
Finney used dramatic pauses, this piercing gaze, sometimes calling out sinners or seeming to. It created this electric atmosphere focused on making a personal decision for Christ right then and there. He also pushed this idea called perfectionism.
Perfectionism.
Yeah, the belief, pretty radical then, that humans could actually strive for, maybe even achieve a state of sinless perfection in this life that really reshaped ideas about human potential.
Wow, that is bold for the time. Who else was out there spreading the word?
Well, taking that revival fire out west to the frontier, you had Peter Cartwright,
Yeah.
big name Methodist circuit rider. He was known for this really passionate, emotional preaching that connected with settlers. Apparently, he wasn't afraid to physically confront hecklers either. He kind of embodied that raw, energetic spirit of frontier religion, traveling huge distances, toughing it out, converting thousands with sheer passion.
And it sounded like the movement also opened doors for voices that weren't typically heard in pulpits back then. Were African-American leaders involved too?
Absolutely, and that's crucial. Harry Hosier was this incredibly influential African-American Methodist preacher. Amazingly, he was popular with both Black and white audiences.
Will it?
Yeah, in that divided society, his eloquence just cut across racial lines, showing that potential for inclusion, even if temporary, in those camp meetings. And then there's Jarena Lee.
Jarena Lee.
She was the first authorized female preacher in the AME Church, a real pioneer who broke through gender barriers to preach. Her story is a powerful example of how the Second Great Awakening sort of expanded roles for women in religious life, pushing boundaries.
So these dynamic leaders clearly helped grow existing churches, especially out on the frontier. Which denominations really thrived during this time?
The Baptists saw explosive growth, particularly in the South and the West. Their focus on, emotional conversion, believers' baptism, and a church structure that gave local congregations a lot of say, that really appealed to the independent spirit out there. And we absolutely have to talk about the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME Church, founded by Richard Allen in 1816.
Okay, why was it so important?
It was just vital. It gave African Americans true religious autonomy, a space to worship free from the discrimination in white churches. But more than that, it quickly became this powerful hub for early abolitionist activism.
Linking faith and freedom.
Directly, a crucial connection between spiritual freedom and the fight for civil liberty. It really shows the movement's transformative power.
And circling back to that burned-over district in New York, you said it was fertile ground for entirely new faiths. What kind of new movements came out of that intense environment?
It really was a hotbed. Out of that spiritual intensity, you get Mormonism, founded by Joseph Smith.
Right.
He claimed divine revelations, finding golden plates, leading to the Book of Mormon and this completely new religious tradition. It was rooted in that revivalist energy, but had its own unique theology and practices.
Okay, what else?
You also saw Millerism emerge, led by William Miller. After studying the Bible intensely, he famously predicted Christ's return, first for 1843, then refining it to 1844.
And that didn't happen.
No. And the widespread great disappointment among his followers was profound. But that movement eventually led to the formation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's just fascinating how diverse the responses were. New scriptures, end times predictions, all bubbling up from that same revivalist energy.
What an incredible journey we've taken today. Thinking about the Second Great Awakening, it clearly wasn't just, a religious thing in isolation. It was this complex mix, democratic ideas that shift to emotion, the economic changes from the market revolution.
Yep.
It feels like it fundamentally rewired America's religious and social landscape in ways we still kind of recognize. It really drives home how deeply faith and society can be intertwined.
Indeed. And this period is such a powerful reminder that big societal shifts often trigger deep changes in how we look for meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
It laid so much groundwork for future social reforms.
Yeah.
Abolition, temperance, women's rights were all fueled by it. And that emphasis on the individual spiritual journey, on personal choice in faith, that's still such a prominent thread in American religious life.
So maybe something for you to think about as you go through your day. How might today's big changes, all the tech shifts, the social transformations, global connections, how might they be quietly shaping new ways people find meaning or build community? Much like the market revolution shaped the Second Great Awakening back then. Something to ponder until our next deep dive.